that mean it's time to start?
I think so. I think that was our dramatic entrance.
Nice.
Hey, hey everyone. Thank you for joining us today. AIGA Atlanta Insider is a monthly in-house interview series where we feature various in-house creatives and creative leaders working throughout Atlanta to create more of a community between all of us. My name is Courtney Maka, and I actually work in-house at CBRE, a commercial real estate company in Atlanta, and I'm also a part of the in-house committee.
And I'm Sam.
I'll be your host this month.
And I'm Sam Zelifro. I'm partnering with Courtney this month. I'm leading the tech, but I also work in-house at Kimberly-Clark, and I'm a part of the in-house committee for AIGA in Atlanta as well.
So we'll run through a quick agenda of the hour. We'll start with introductions, which we're in right now, and then we'll switch over to Amy Mangan of the Creative Group, who will update us on the pulse of design in Atlanta right now, called the Market Minute. Then we'll jump straight into our conversation with Katie Kirschner, who is the Vice President of Brand Content and Digital Marketing at NCR, located in Midtown. We'll leave a little time at the end for a Q&A. So if you have any questions during it, feel free to enter it in the chat box or use the Q&A feature, and we'll get to those by the end of the hour.
Awesome.
So right now, it's me and Sam leading this, but we cannot do this alone. This is our entire in-house committee with AIGA Atlanta, and all of us put together this each month, and we have to thank everyone because it's definitely a village. So you'll see these faces over the next few months as we cycle through who's hosting these calls, and hopefully you'll get to know each of us more. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Amy Mangan with the Creative Group.
Hey guys, I'm Amy. I'm with TCG, the Creative Group, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in Atlanta and then some national trends as well. So we can move over to the next slide, Sam, please. All right, so here in Atlanta, I picked the last 3 months to just search for graphic design jobs in Career Builder specifically. We have a kind of back-end analytics tool that we have access to with them, just to see which companies locally were posting the most jobs in the last 3 months for graphic designers specifically. And Carter's was far and away posting the most roles. So if you're looking for a job in design or you know someone who is, you might want to advise them to kind of jot down this list and definitely get your resume and portfolio submitted over. IBM was doing quite a bit of hiring. Turner, Time Warner, Shaw Industries, surprisingly, so the carpet company up in Calhoun, Georgia, had a lot of graphic design roles posted. And then also rounding out the list of the top 5, 22 Squared, the creative agency in Midtown. And then on a national level of just the hot jobs, so essentially what this is companies that have asked TCG to fill positions, whether it's for a full-time role or a contract role, it's everything is lumped in. But the most roles we were seeing in the last month, this is not 3 months, it's just the last month since our last webinar, motion graphics topped the list. So not super surprising. People need motion designers for all the web and digital content they're trying to pump out right now, but also we're seeing it being requested for things like e-learning programs and also various webinar meetings like we're doing now that maybe would have previously been an in-person sort of event. Production artists came back up on the list, so that had dropped off for a while. So we're happy to see that back on, meaning kind of is rolling a little bit again. And then marketing assistants, and then skipping down one, traffic coordinators are high on the list. We've seen this reflected in Atlanta as well with our own business. And I think the reason for that is companies are looking for people who are maybe a little bit more junior mid and can wear a lot of hats. So they need to fill in a bunch of gaps in the team. And maybe the price point is not, that of somebody who's a little bit more senior. And then also digital marketing managers was really busy in the last month, which is not super surprising. And then moving over to the next slide, if you were on last month's webinar, you would have heard me chat a little bit about just supply and demand in the market. These charts are taken from that Career Builder analytics tool that we have. But the top chart I think is really interesting. So it's job postings is the blue line for the last 12 months. And then below that, the green line is active candidates. So active candidates would be essentially anybody who's updated a resume, posted a new resume, or is actively applying to jobs. And you can see there's a huge disparity between the amount of graphic design roles that are posted and then the amount of candidates who are actively in the market. See a little bit of a spike in March. Makes sense. That was right around when COVID started happening. There were layoffs and furloughs, and probably people were a little bit scared in the market as well at that time. But generally speaking, there's a big gap there. And then the bottom chart is an interesting trend. So this is year over year active candidates. Gray line would have been 2019, green is this year. And you can see, you see those candidates jump up in March again. But what you still can see is that there were a lot more active candidates, people out there looking for jobs, posting and applying to jobs a year ago than there are now. So that's specifically in the graphic design space. So if you're a hiring manager, or you're on a team that's looking to fill a role in that vein, that might explain why if you're struggling to find the right kind of quality talent that you're looking for, that may give you a sense of kind of what's going on. I think people who are employed, many of them are just sticking. They're not really proactive in their search right now. And then the last slide that we have for you is a fun one. It's about, we did a survey about just summer vacations, taking time off specifically right now in COVID, and kind of what people are feeling, thinking, hearing in the market. So again, is a national survey. One thing that really stood out to me is 14% of people said that they simply were too busy to take any time off. We're seeing that, we're hearing that in Atlanta from a lot of our clients. Many teams, unfortunately, had layoffs, had furloughs, or even if they didn't, they're in a hiring freeze, and maybe those projects were put on hold. But heading into June, and now in July, Q3 for many people, we really started to see things picking up quite a bit. So many of the projects that had been put on hold started, coming down the pike again, plus new things. And then because of that, now these teams that may be skeleton crews that weren't before are inundated, and they just don't feel like they've got the bandwidth to take the time off. Might be, something to look at for your team to see kind of where people feel like they are. And then in the blue box, that pie chart on the right, I think this is really interesting. 9% of people were actively discouraged from taking time off this summer. Something, I hope nobody on this call is in that boat. That's not a great place to be. It's not awesome for morale or long-term, longevity with people staying with the company. Hopefully, your team is in a place where you can kind of cover for each other. And if not, freelance is definitely a good option to kind of fill in as needed to allow people to take the breathing time and space that they need. Even if they're not going anywhere right now, it's good to just be able to kind of check out and shut down. And then if you're a leader or, on a team that hasn't had any communication, that's about over half of the people we interviewed said that they hadn't received any communication regarding taking time off. So it might just be something you want to think about and discuss with your leadership, your team, and see where people kind of fall in that. So if you want any more information on either the charts that I shared from Career Builder, or you want to see this full report, because there's a lot more data here than just this chart, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And with that, I will hand it back to Courtney.
Thank you, Amy. That's so interesting and really surprising that there is so many people who haven't communicated about that. I know me personally, I have a week at the end of the month coming up where I will be happily spending it at home. So next, we're going to jump straight into our conversation with Katie Kirschner. So Katie is the Vice President of Brand Content and Digital Marketing at NCR. She's a data-driven, client-obsessed, results-oriented strategy, marketing, and communications executive. After spending a number of years in corporate strategy development, she's taken the leap into brand strategy and marketing leadership. Her mantra is forever growing, forever learning, forever changing. And I'm excited for what she has to share with us. So let's jump right into it. Hey, Katie.
Hey, good afternoon.
Thank you for sharing your lunch hour with all of us today.
Oh, you're ever so welcome. And that's a really big gift because I love food. So I'm drinking tea to savor it.
I am so thankful.
I'm
Will you will you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to NCR?
Yeah, sure. So I have a background in corporate strategy development. So I started my career more in boutique consulting. I've traveled all over the world, speaking to companies, different types of entities in different industries on how to grow or how to develop sustainable growth. So meaning if there are areas that are dipping, how do you continue to combat those and as market conditions change? And so that background led me to brand strategy, which is the next step after corporate strategy development. So once you come up with your mission, your vision, and how you're going to get there, it's what does the brand need to do to support that? And then what is the marketing strategy? So executionally, what do you need to do from a campaign program perspective? So demand generation, product strategy, including product marketing, to be able to lift you to the mission, to get to the goals of that mission, vision, et cetera. And so what brought me to NCR, I went from boutique consulting to logistics, which is I don't want to say it's becoming less of an archaic industry, but it's an old school industry. It's been around for a really long time. And I decided I wanted to move back to the States. I was living in Berlin, Germany at the time. My family's from Atlanta. I'm from Atlanta. I am a born and raised Atlantan. And was looking in two areas of fast-paced industries. I wanted to get back into something that was a little more innovative. I love dynamism, similar to the consulting industry, and that would have been fashion or technology. I had a couple of friends who worked in fashion, decided culturally that wasn't the way to go for me. No offense to anyone who works in fashion, culturally it wasn't the way to go for me. So NCR had popped up in Atlanta, and I was like, oh, Atlanta, because I was looking at Boston or Atlanta. Very excited to come back, obviously to be close to my family. And so I ended up getting a job starting in what would be traditionally called product marketing. And then I've been here for 3 years and have had 4 different positions. So it's been dynamic. That's exactly what I asked for. I've had 4 different bosses. So yeah, that's dynamic, but I love every step of the way and I've learned a whole lot. Here I am, Atlanta, NCR.
That's awesome. So I recently learned that NCR goes back a long way. Like, I don't think people realize how long it's been around. So could you share a little bit more about what NCR does?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you that live in Atlanta and you've ever driven down 85 or just been stuck on 85 for a long period of time, you probably see this huge glass building that has NCR on it. And people always know us from the gym. They're like, oh yeah, you're the one with the treadmills that we can see from the highway. I'm like, yes, but we don't make treadmills. I'm sorry to disappoint. We are a global technology company. We do make technology. You use us, or the average consumer, which is everyone that's on this call, uses us about 3 times a day and doesn't even realize it. So if you've ever done self-checkout at a grocery store or bought a movie ticket or used your mobile pass to board a plane, which you're probably doing a lot more frequently now since it's all touchless. Or if you've ever taken a picture of your check for it to upload into your bank account or done banking in general, you've used NCR technology. We white label it naturally, meaning we make it so that it's branded for our customers, putting our customers first and helping them to drive a great consumer experience. Basically, we create the technology, which is the software, services, and hardware to run an entire store, restaurant, or bank.
Awesome. And you lead the marketing team. How does marketing fit within the larger organization?
So we have our SVP of Corporate Marketing and Public Affairs, as well as our Chief Government Relations Officer. She leads basically the entity of marketing and communications. And then within that realm, she's basically what you would consider a CMO of our company. Within that realm, I specifically lead brand strategy, content strategy, and digital marketing. And what that encompasses is brand strategy, content marketing, content development. So creative services is a portion of that. Digital marketing, so campaign development, program development, and then digital properties, which is managing our entire tech stack, our marketing tech stack. So we use Adobe as a tech stack, so it's AEM, Target, etc. I won't go into details of that because I understand the crowd's creative, but basically I lead the team that helps to manage that ecosystem as well as analyst relations.
Cool. So you said that the culture at NCR is a lot more fast-paced and dynamic. How would you describe like your team specifically? Like what's the culture of your marketing crew?
Of my team? Wow, the culture of my team. I think that we are equally as dynamic in nature as the company. We have to shift very quickly, so we have to be agile in nature. My team is quite collaborative. I mean, I think my team is tons of fun. I have lots of fun with my team. We laugh all the time and cry when we have to if we have to adhere to a very tight deadline, which we're given almost on a daily basis. So I'll say they're resilient. We have resilience in our team to be able to meet some of those deadlines and actually to provide quite a bit of change management in the realm of marketing. So I would say fun, resilient, dynamic, and yeah, I think that's about it.
Cool. So you came from corporate strategy, and so I know one of the things that you're really big on is bringing strategy into everything that you guys do. So I'm curious how you bring creative to that strategy table, if that makes sense. Like, how do you, yeah.
That's a good question. So naturally, I have a background in strategy. So my first thought is to think strategically, think about the macro picture before I get into the details of the micro. And strategy is also only good as the implementation of it, right? Strategy can be very theoretical in nature. So you also have to understand how do you strategically implement something. So when creative services came under me within NCR 2.5 years ago, I would say, it was a very order-taking sort of entity, right? Stakeholders within the company would submit orders to this team, and it acted as an internal agency, but less as a consultative internal agency, more like, hey, I need this brochure made. I want the color purple on the top right corner. I want this line to be over here. I want this picture to be sized like this. And they're being dictated that by an individual who has zero design background, right? And so you'd end up with a piece of creative that did your stakeholder or did your client, at that time, that's what they called them, client like it? Sure, they probably loved it, but is it actually going to drive the result that you want it to? Because what creatives can bring to the table is a very strategic mindset and what works from a CX perspective, that consumer experience, that customer experience, the one who's going to experience that piece, because they've made it over time, as well as they know the psychological elements of design, right? So it was like, man, these creatives are really not able to use this skill. We're not using them for what we should be able to capitalize on them for, right? The more that we dictate design, the less creative that design is, the less we're going to be able to push the limits and make sure our brand is looking above and beyond great. But we're also dictating something that may not really work for that audience or may not work for that format. And so the way I wanted to start to change that was to say, okay, creatives, and this took a while and we're still in the process of it, but creatives, you are strategic partners. You are consultants. You are creative consultants. And so when someone comes to you with an ask, the first thing that we train them to ask is like, what are you trying to achieve? Who is the audience? Where is this going to live? As in, what platform is this going to live on? And then obviously with what you're trying to achieve, it's not just the lead generation or that result. It's also, what is the feeling you're trying to evoke at the end? What do you want them to do at the end of engaging with this video, like seeing this video or reading this brochure or reading this blog. And so when they started to ask those questions, and my creative PMO helped to develop PMO, project managers helped to develop the templates that people could fill out before it got to a creative, as long as that brief is created well, first of all, it creates much more efficiency in the process. A creative can pump out a piece of creative much faster than having multiple iterations. And also it stops the question of, this should be purple. So it stops the objectivism of creating that creative, and more along the lines like, hey guys, here's the piece of creative that's going to help you to drive that result you talked about you wanted to get. Now with the change management, to get them to be that strategic partner, there's also sometimes education on the other side, right? So they had to then explain how they got there. And I'm not saying we're fully there as a company yet, but slowly but surely, as you build the case studies that with proven results, that if a creative becomes a strategic partner rather than an order taker, it's a far better outcome than before, or than it would be if it was driven by an individual who doesn't know how to write a video script or doesn't know how to choose the right music that's going to evoke some sort of emotion within that video. That was a very answer to your question, but hopefully that worked.
No, that makes sense. So I guess you were mentioning that your designers sort of do a dual role of being both a consultant, but also a little bit bringing the education to the table. And I think that's really interesting. Like, here, this is why we're going to do this, and here's the value it's going to bring to you, because you were mentioning it's very results oriented. So I think that's really interesting, especially since I'm sure a lot of us on this call who work in-house have encountered the order taking assignments that we've had.
Yeah.
Hey, hi, this is Sam. I wanted to jump in because as I was listening to you talk, Katie, what was going through my head is, wow, like a strong brief can make all the difference in that process. But if your clients weren't used to using that in the past, they were used to just coming to you and saying, I want a purple box here, and I want lines here, and this is the content I want. How did you start to make the shift and educate them on how to write a strong brief to yield the creative that can actually be a game changer for the business?
Yeah, honestly, that was the make or breaker, right? I think the change management came more on the creative receiving side than the creative side, because, and this is, anytime you work with an agency, and for those that work for agencies that are on this call, an agency's output is only as good as our input. A company's input, a team's input. Not to say the agency also has to be skilled in a certain area to get that output, but it's the same when we think about the stakeholders in an internal company. And so what we had to train them is like, they were never asked these questions like, who's your audience? What are you trying to achieve? And like, why are you asking me these questions? I'm sure my creative project managers can tell you like how much pushback we got, and maybe still get at times, but like, why are you asking me these questions? Like, because the answers to this impact the story, and the story drives the format. So actually we're now in another phase of change management where I'm trying to help people to understand that content or the story drives the format. So some people will come to you and say, I need a video. And I need it to convey this message, and I'll answer your little questions. Answer who's the audience, where's it gonna live, blah, blah. At the end of the day, we have programming and content strategy individuals as well on our team that work hand in hand with our creative. And we'll say, okay, well, based on the story you're trying to tell to this particular audience, a video doesn't really make sense. It's not gonna be compelling. This would be much better as an interactive infographic or an ebook. And so now we're moving towards they're answering the questions, which took a long time. How do we get them to do that? We help them to see an outcome driven by those answers to questions. But now the next phase is showing them how much the story informs the format. So instead of it dictating a video, we say, hey, overall, what are we trying to achieve with this audience in a program with many different assets? And then we'll talk about the asset that makes sense for that story.
Yeah,
Great.
that's awesome. That's like what I'm living every day. So hearing you talk like that, and like, yes, I'm like nodding along, like exactly, spot on.
So I'm curious, was your team like ready to make that switch into becoming like a consultant, or did you have to kind of coach them at all or help have them switch their mindset, or were there like inner designers who wanted to consult these clients? Like, were they just ready to like burst open and be like, yes, we're here to help you?
To be honest, I think, well, we have a lot of new team members in the creative that were brought on later. So we also hired individuals who had that mindset. But for the legacy, and I call them legacy, for the individuals who's there, I think they were more yearning to be that. So they were itching, and they were like, man, like, you know, they're fighting over the color purple. And I always bring that up because it gets that ridiculous. They're fighting over the color purple. But don't they know that like purple in this instance isn't like ADA compliant for a web page, or it doesn't make sense because it completely clashes a different mood with this bright yellow that they have over here. And this is supposed to be a sad movie. Like purple makes it like happy Barney go lucky. So I think they were yearning to help people to understand the creative choices they were making to help build the outcome or get towards the outcome that you want with that piece of content. So I'll say the change management came more from the process behind it. So creatives by nature are not normally very process driven or operationally driven. So, and that's not a bad thing. We all want strengths, and you want to meet strengths with other individuals. That's why we have our creative project managers. But it was, hey, you know, in order for this to work, you're going to have to really, you know, dig deep and look at what that creative brief is and ask the further questions that you may need to help refine this. So like our goal is to finish an asset with the least amount of iterations. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that our creatives are strategically and let's say really honed in on the creative brief, like the information that's been given, so that they can correctly apply it. Like if they're missing, you know, hey, we did say like the audience was very technical, this probably needs to be a little more technical, it's too lively. And they're like, oh, you know, I missed that part. That's an iteration that you're making. So it's also paying attention to the details that are coming towards you. And what does that mean for the creative? But other than that, I think, I mean, my creative PM project managers may say differently. I think they did a pretty good job in the transition. Most of them.
That's awesome. So now that you kind of have this team that you're developing and giving them a lot more strategic power, I'm curious in like what other ways you're empowering them or how you're helping them figure out how they want to grow their career, like within NCR or elsewhere.
Yeah, the career question is really interesting for creatives. I will say, let's say, how do you grow? How am I growing them first? Well, the first thing to grow is, I know I've been talking about them being strategic partners, the change management involved with that, et cetera. You also have to know when to choose your battles. Like, does it really matter to fight over the color purple for this particular instance? No, because you may win the battle with the script portion of it, which is actually more important to that. So let me caveat previously what I said is, creatives tend to get married to their creative, you know, like this is my baby. This is the most beautiful thing that I could possibly come out with. And a lot of creatives are perfectionists in that nature, you know, like they want it to be perfect. They want to have answered the brief completely and understand how every color and line and copy works completely together. But I think it's the balance between what do you fight for because you know it's going to drive the result versus what do you like, all right, I'm going to give into that so that you can finish it, right? Don't pass good for perfect, especially those who work in a corporate environment. And if you've ever worked with NCR or probably one of the other firms out here, we move really fast. So you have to also choose your battles. And that's a growth area for creatives is, I know it's your baby and you want to be married to it, and that's very important, but just choose wisely on what you're going to fight for because of the result it's going to drive versus what you're just going to say, okay, I'm not even going to care about that one purple line that you desire. As far as career growth goes, it's very few companies. So your Fortune 500, let's say, especially within the B2B environment, but also in B2C environments, have a chief creative officer, right? Or even a chief content officer at that. And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong, but it's just the reality of it. It's very seldom that you have a VP of creative, an SVP of creative, or a chief creative officer. And so if you're looking to stay in a corporate environment, because I think you could easily move up in an agency environment in that realm, because those positions do exist within the agency environment. But if you're looking to move up in a corporate environment, it's all about diversifying your skill set. And I would almost say this for anyone who works in an agency environment as well. Because you never know what's going to happen at an agency, but you also may want to grow outside of what that agency actually does. So I would challenge creatives to build a skill set and capability along the marketing value chain. And by that, I mean, let's say you want to picture what your life may look like. And I challenge my team members to this, at least the ones that directly report to me. What you want your life to look like 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years from now in a day. What do you want a day to look like? Like literally go from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to sleep, both professionally and personally, because what you do professionally impacts what you do personally and vice versa. And people don't realize that. They think of career growth and they just think about what the professional side of it is going to look like, but they have to think about how that professional side will impact their personal side. So I say, think about your day from end to end. What are the things you're going to do, the tasks you're going to do? You're going to wake up. Do you have to get a baby ready for school too? Do you then have to cook breakfast? Are you waking up at like 6:30 in the morning for you to be able to do emails before that kid wakes up? And then you're going to get the kid ready, and then you're going to have to take him to school, or the nanny's going to take him to school, and then you're going to go to the office. So it's like, what does that day look like in the 3, 5 to 7 year? You can do it longer out. I just think some people can grasp the short term a lot easier when it comes to goals. And then you say, okay, if this is my day, what is it that's missing from my current day to get to this day? So what are the skill sets or capabilities that I'm going to need or personally need, like, I don't know, find a husband, wife, whatever your choice is, have a baby, whatever that is, what's missing in my life to work on to get to that 3-year point. And then you start building on that skill set. So for creative, if your desire is to always design and you want to stick to design, be the best design, and you don't want to grow past an art director level, or you don't want to manage people, that's what your day will look like. You don't have to develop, let's say, management skills, leadership skills, I believe everyone should have, but not management skills. You wouldn't have to develop in the realm of the other parts of the marketing value chain. Let's say you want to just stick to video. You want to do video design for the rest of life. Good. You've marked that out. You want to get better at it. You want to be the best at it. So you're going to take courses in it. You're going to be the best video person you've ever been in your life at that level, right? But if you decide in a corporate environment, you're like, well, I'd really like to start leading people. I'd like to get to a point to where my meetings are more on the marketing strategy side and then working with design, because I know that design is my background to kind of influence that. Well, you probably need to fill gaps in the marketing realm. So you need to think about the courses that you're going to take, the individuals that you'll shadow, et cetera. And really, the more you build your skill set along that marketing value chain, the more you'll be able to move up in marketing in general in a corporate environment. Whereas design will hinder you. You're in a niche, so you're capped, right? If you think about the CEO, the COO, the CMO, any of the C-suite of a corporate environment, they've gathered skill sets and capabilities or have a base knowledge, or actually they have better than a base knowledge, they have a good knowledge of how other disciplines work together. And that's how they've gotten to that position, right? And so if you're wanting to move up in a corporate environment, you have to think about the voids you need to fill in your skill sets and capabilities and understandings in order for you to become that leader at whatever level that you want to be.
Yeah, there's so much value in understanding the entire corporate field that you're in and understanding like who the since internally you work with so many clients from different groups, and if you understand how all of their teams work and like what their values are and like what they're striving for, I feel like it's so much easier to kind of see the bigger picture and kind of figure out the direction you want to go. So you were mentioning how to like fill gaps that you have, but what about on the flip side, like strengths? So how do you suggest, like, I think we talked before about like the value of leveraging the strengths that you have as you grow your career. Could you kind of expand on that?
Yeah, so let me just define a little better what I mean by gaps. You can have a strength in something, but you want to strengthen that strength. So you're filling a gap to the next level of that strength. I am a huge proponent of Marcus Buckingham and Strength Finder and focusing on your strengths rather than your weaknesses. I think Marcus Buckingham is just brilliant in this, but basically what it revolves around is if you focus your time and energy on your weaknesses, you're missing out on further developing and growing your strengths. Now, with that said, if one of your weaknesses is you're a jerk, you should probably work on not being a jerk. Like, let's talk about what we mean by weaknesses here. You should probably work on, the delivery of your message needs to be a little bit more eloquent, or the art of persuasion needs to be developed. But if you have a strength in, let's say in design in general, graphic design, you have a strength in graphic design, and you've noticed that you love working and you have a skill set to be able to look at the way code works with design. So you're like, oh man, I really have a passion for code, and I kind of have the mindset that I could move my design. So, the details of it on how code works, you may want to start stemming into web design. And then from web design, you can even further develop into being a front-end developer, right? And now you're extending, and this is not even on the marketing value chain, you're extending into software, right? Or the development in technology. And so start building upon those strengths and where your passion leads you on that strength. Now let's be real for a second here. Passion doesn't trump competency. So I'm not very tall. I'm 5'5.5", 5'6" on a good day. So I'll just say 5'6". And I was never going to be like the best basketball player in the world. And if I had a passion to be that, I could certainly work on it. And let's say I had two left feet. I had two left feet. I sucked at basketball. But I loved just bouncing the ball around and playing, right? And I had such a great passion for watching basketball, understanding how the game worked. The thing is I didn't have the base strengths or skill sets to grow on to be able to become the best basketball player in the world. I'd probably be the best basketball advocate in the world, but not the best player in the world. So you want to be realistic about what your passions are. And it's really hard to discover your strengths. It's not an easy thing. That it requires self-awareness. People always say self-awareness helps you to also, discover where you're weak and where you need to work on. It also helps you discover what you're strongest in and how you can work against that. So I encourage everyone, if you can do Strength Finder. I think it's actually free online if you wanted to take it. But don't let passion trump competency. Make sure that your competency, your baseline competency is there, and then growing against that competency.
That's awesome.
I just want to jump in for a second. Some of the best advice I got very early on in my career was around finding your sweet spot. So it was around finding what you're good at, what you enjoy, and then where there's a need. So I really enjoy design. I really enjoy art. That's kind of what started off, my career. And then I got good at design. And now it's about finding a role where I can use those things together to, again, kind of find my sweet spot and to grow my career. So a lot of what you're saying, I think, kind of fits into that. It's interesting, as I've thought about how my career is going to grow in the future, it's about looking for the new opportunities to continue to be challenged and to grow and learn. So, again, Katie, just awesome stuff you're saying. I'm just nodding along the whole time, smiling.
I mean, I have a good example. And I didn't say this in my background, but I was a musical theater major. I did theater my entire life. And I absolutely love singing, dancing. I was in a TV show when I was a kid. And I love all of that. I still love that today. I have a great passion for it. But what I realized was my strength was my ability to evoke feelings from people. So helping them to have a passion along with me. That an actor has the ability to make you feel sad or happy or scared. And so when you think about, yes, I moved to the corporate world. When you think about the corporate world, there is a heavy element of having the art of persuasion with people. And there's a lot said on getting people passionate about a vision that you may have for a team. And what theater also helped me, the strength that I had was being an orator. I can speak in front of crowds. I don't have an issue with it. I mean, we're doing it right now, although I'm not really in front of you guys, but I don't have an issue with it. So how do I take that strength, those strengths that I had from musical theater and apply them into a corporate environment? And it's unbelievable how these skill sets are translatable if you just think of them as a strength rather than pigeonholing yourself into one particular industry position or role.
That's so interesting. I'm trying really hard not to go on a tangent. Like, Katie, what's your favorite musical? Like, what is your favorite musical right now? I really need to know, actually.
Wicked is so good. Oh my gosh. Wicked was the best. It was the best. I will say.
I agree.
But Hamilton, okay. Well, but Wicked right now, I'll say Wicked right now. That way I can't bounce between them. But yeah.
Wicked, Hamilton, you know, all good ones. But so you talked about building your self-awareness to kind of recognize what your strengths are, and then you personally jumped from musical theater to corporate strategy and now marketing. How do you suggest, like, if people aren't familiar with like developing more self-awareness, like what, besides for just taking like a test, like what things do you recommend people do to kind of figure out how to figure out who they are, basically?
I mean, I don't want to be the one like read books and take courses, but I would suggest you drum up on emotional intelligence. So understanding what that means. And it also helps you to be more self-aware when you read up on what emotional intelligence is and how that you can further develop that, because you developing that helps you to be more self-aware, and it also helps you to better interact with individuals. But I'll say, how do you find your strengths? First, list out what your passions are, and then list out right now, based on those passions, what you're actually really good at. Like what you're like, well, I wouldn't say I'm the best at singing, but I'm good at singing. But then again, like that's a passion. And does that match the day I want 3 years from now? Right? So it's matching your competency to your passion, to what you want your day to look like in the future. And just doing that without having to take a course, and don't ask your mom if she thinks you're really good at it. Like I would also ask people like, hey, I really think these may be my strengths. What do you think about that? And you want to put people in your life that are going to give you be open, honest, and transparent. So I would pick those people wisely and then work with them, seeing how you are in a corporate environment or personal environment to help to identify those strengths too.
Yeah, I actually at work, I did an exercise, like a 360 interview, where I did go to a few people and ask them like, what strengths do I have that you recognize, and like what are some areas of development? And even though it can be a little scary, I feel like it's really productive, and you have such blind spots on like what you are capable of, I think. So this is really awesome advice. So I think now we're getting near the end of the hour. I'm not sure if Sam, you have some questions in the chat, or if anyone else who's listening has some questions that they're desperate to ask Katie. Musical theater oriented, corporate strategy oriented, marketing oriented.
I've got a couple of questions I can kind of tee up for Katie. The first one, can you talk about mentorship and how that has been a tool in developing either your skills or someone else's skills around you?
Yeah, it's great. That's really, really good. I mean, people always say, wisely choose your mentors. A mentorship, you choosing the mentor, it is 90% your job if that mentorship is successful or not. So if people come to me and ask me to be a mentor, they need to be prepared to think about what they're trying to get out of this mentorship. So whenever I look for a mentor, I think, man, you know, who would be if this is what I want my day to look like, then I want people in my life that are going to help me to understand how I get to that day, and build the skill set and capabilities to get to that day. So I would choose that mentor, and you can have multiple mentors. It's not a big deal. It's just a lot of work. I'm telling you, you put in the effort to it. And so you would say, okay, I'm going to get a mentor around digital marketing and a high leadership position that's led multiple disciplines or teams, just as an example, because I want to not only learn maybe, you know, how they think about digital marketing and how they grow it, but also when they look at talent, you know, if they're successful, when they're looking at talent, how are they assessing that talent? And when they're in difficult situations where they have to persuade team members who don't report into them, you know, how do they do that? So if you've seen a mentor that has that capability, that's where you would hone all of your questions around, when you have the sessions with a mentor, hone the questions on that. You should always be prepared for a time that you have with your mentor. You should never come in and be like, oh, you know, we're just going to sit and, you know, shoot the whatever, we're just going to hang out. And by all means, I think you could do that. But usually mentors are in more senior level positions and are busy people. So you want to maximize that amount of time you have with them. And that's only through preparation and knowing exactly what you want to get out of each session. So being prepared for that. That's my recommendation on mentorships.
That's really helpful. I've been in a few mentorship relationships, and that's so true. Like on the mentee side, it's really all about whether you're putting in the effort and you're putting in the time to make it worthwhile. Side plug for the AIGA mentorship program that happens every year. We've been doing that for 5 years. Highly recommend it if you want to be a mentor or a mentee, anyone that's on the call.
That's awesome.
One of the other questions that we had is around either at NCR, was there a need to build brand identity guidelines, or did they already exist? And what did that look like?
They have existed. They've existed and adapted over time. So I think within my time at NCR, which is the 3 years, man, I should ask my lead project manager, but I think we've done them 2.5 times. So meaning, you know, we've started from scratch again. Now that's not an overhaul. It's not like we're redoing the logo or the name of the company, which I have done in my past, but it's really like, okay, what is the messaging that we're going to be adding in? How do we use the green? Because that's our color, is green. It just happens to be also the color of money, but you know, how are we using the green? And I think this last time that we created brand guidelines is the most robust that we've ever done. So I applied what I had in my previous life to here to say, hey, we need to be thinking about, you know, what does logo lockups look like? What does our logo look like on vehicles? Because we're global, so we also have company vehicles. We also have a managed services team that goes to service that is in NCR vehicles. What does it look like on buildings? So this time it's more robust in nature, so it's expanded, but we definitely have brand identity guidelines, and it only helps us too, right? So when someone comes up and they want to change something, or they want something to be the color purple, we say, according to our brand guidelines, we don't do the color purple. It's not in our palette. So we're happy to do the color green. I think once you get leadership, like top leadership sign off on that, it's probably the best way to have an easy conversation with individuals.
Gives you a backbone for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we have another question that came through in the chat. Eric, at NCR, he's asking, how does UX interface with the graphic staff, or are they on the same team?
Like UX for software? I kind of have to caveat. I can answer it for both directions. So we have a CX team that was recently established, and they actually look at across all of our products, So whatever the consumer, our customers are interacting with, that's a consistent experience. So we work closely with that team and saying, okay, what are the guidelines that we'll have for hardware that goes out? What does our software need to look like consistently? Like the buttons, where our logo goes. What are the colors of the buttons that we're going to use? They develop all of that, but it's in collaboration with, this is what, from a marketing and brand perspective, we want our brand to look like. So they don't go outside of that. But naturally, in the UX world of software and hardware, there are more stipulations and specs that you have to adhere to. Like I said before, being ADA compliant, and they may need to have 17 different colors of different buttons, and we only have 14 in our palette. So what are the other 3 that they can add from a software perspective? So for UX, for that, hand in hand, building that out. And then if UX is from a web perspective, it's the same team. It's the team that's under me. So if you're looking at the CX, I call it CX experience, or the interface that you have with your customers from a online perspective, those teams work hand in hand with the creative team. And in fact, the gentleman on the creative team who's helping us with web design, because he happens to also have a background in it as a ACD and web design, he's helping our digital properties team, who owns that tech stack, to help define the layout of pages and the design of that, adhering obviously to our brand guidelines, because he helped to build those as well.
Right on. Cool. Okay. One more just came through from Brianna. Thank you. She's saying she's on a bit of an island. So are there any recommendations for where to start as far as finding a mentor? So we already mentioned the AIGA mentor program. So again, we'll plug and say that that's a great way to find someone in the industry to learn from. But Katie, do you have any other recommendations, or Courtney, you too?
So it would depend if you're in-house, or like if you're in a company, so you're an in-house creative in a company, or if you're in an agency. If you're in an agency, obviously organizations like the AIGA, but also, I guess, depending on how big the agency is, look within that. I would also say from a in-house creative perspective, the best way to search for a mentor, again, is to think about what type of mentor that you need and want, and then to work with your manager on saying, hey, these are the gaps. And hopefully you're having these conversations with the manager. Hey, these are the gaps that I want to fill. Is there anyone across our organization that you think would be great for me to reach out to in order to, mentor me for these things? And, I'm happy to connect. If I had one of my creatives walk up to me and say that, I'd be like, oh, it's amazing. Sure. Let's think about it. Or if I didn't know somebody within the organization, that I knew someone who probably knew someone, because we're a huge company, right? So I would say start with your manager, let them know what your goals are. If your manager is not helping you do that, get another job. Don't work for that manager.
For real.
If your manager's not helping you to do that, then organizations always, ISIC is a great example. I don't know if anyone's aware of that, but it's an international organization that helps students to get international internships, but it's also a great opportunity. I am a part of ISIC. I started the one at GSU, and I'm also a part of their executive org, and we always get, pulled for menteeships or mentorships. So it's nice to be part of organizations like that.
I also want to mention that there's also an opportunity, even if you're trying to build skills, it's possible getting a mentor in a different realm than you work in. You can find a lot of those connections, for your day-to-day, like you were saying, Katie, if you were in musical theater, but then you started talking to someone who was a corporate strategist, I'm sure you would have learned a lot from that, that mentorship relationship. So thinking beyond just the role that people have, and I think thinking about the actions and the way that they do their job is also valuable. And then we have one more question from Liam, I think, and then that'll probably wrap us up. So this one's very specific. Do you have company support on the structural change management that you guys have done? Is it leadership driven, or a dedicated change management partner that you work with? Or is it entirely just within your group driving that change?
So change management happens across organizations in different capacities all the time, right? Whenever you have a company that's trying to change who they are in the marketplace, especially with NCR, or that changes on a frequent basis, so the dynamism of the company, you will always have change management. I mean, you even have change management if you get a new leader, right? And you have to change to the style of that new leader. It can be on the most micro level. So when it came to change management within our team, yes, it was led by me helping to mentor my team on some of the steps that we could take to change. But I am also a very strong proponent of a solution-oriented mindset. So when any of my team members come to me, they know they can always come with a challenge, but therefore should have a suggestion for a solution. You should never come to a leader with a challenge and not have a solution. And it normally revolves around change management in some sort, difficulty in getting something through, whatever that is. And it doesn't have to be right. You don't have to have the right solution. You say, hey, I thought about it. It's just the fact that you thought about it, right? And the best question that you can ask, not just your manager, but anybody that you're speaking to when you're trying to change their mindset, your manager would be more of like, hey, I'm giving you a proposal for a solution. Does this work? You always ask the question, am I missing something, or what am I missing? Because it's a humbling question for them to know and to think that that you don't know everything. You don't have the full picture, right? Especially when you're talking to a leader on that. So presenting a solution and say, but what am I missing? Is there something that I'm missing that I should take into account of this solution? It's the same when you're trying to change someone's mindset that's not your leader or your mindset, to be like, hey, I'm proposing this, but is there something that I'm missing? Is there something that I should apply? And I think that's one way that's a good approach to change management. I would say it's leadership driven though at NCR.
Awesome. That's such great advice. What am I missing? So we're getting near the end of the hour, so I think we're going to wrap up now. Thank you so much, Katie, for joining us today, and thank you everyone here for coming with your questions and interest.
Questions. I hope it was fruitful. I hope it was fruitful for everybody.
Definitely. And Katie, if folks are interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best way?
LinkedIn. I'm on social media. I'm active on LinkedIn, so you can certainly connect with me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
It's been great.
Appreciate it.
You too.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. See you next month.